Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Just recently, a lot of you might have already be aware of this, but there was a program, Ross Coulthart, who investigates UFOs, interviews different people about it all the time. And I watched a video that was just recently posted on YouTube, where he interviewed a bunch of different people, including Dr. Garry Nolan. And of course, Garry Nolan is a Stanford professor, and he's someone who was asked by the CIA at one point to investigate military personnel who got too close to UFOs and suffered brain damage, and he was brought in by the CIA to study these cases to figure out what's going on. But this Dr. Nolan's becoming a pretty big voice in the UFO community right now. One of the loudest voices, actually. He might actually be the loudest voice at this point. I mean, especially considering, over the years, we've had different people who have stepped up and weren't concerned what the status quo thought about them. For instance, the late Stanton Friedman, who passed away in 2019. For years, he was basically, one of the top people everyone would go to talk about this subject. I mean, he had a very impressive pedigree. He was a nuclear physicist and someone who became interested in UFOs and flying saucers and started looking at the government documents and realized that in fact, something's going on here. And he came to the conclusion that there are beings from other planets coming here, and that there's a cosmic Watergate to cover it up. And he talked about that all the way to the end. And I actually had the pleasure of talking to Stanton Friedman probably about 3 times over the years. A while ago, it was in the late 90s, in 1997, when it was the 50th anniversary of Roswell. I talked to him on the phone. I was a reporter at different newspapers when I talked to him, and I would talk to him about this, and he would fax me information. And so he was a good guy. And right now, it seems like the guy that's starting to become the next Stanton Friedman is Garry Nolan. This guy is, he has the background. He has there's a legitimacy to him. So it's amazing the things that he's stating publicly, and he doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks, because as far as he's concerned, he knows that there's something going on, just like Stanton Friedman knew there was something going on. But anyway, on this recent interview that he had with Ross Coulthart, it was a bunch of different people he interviewed, and it was very interesting. I will leave the link so you could watch it yourself if you haven't seen it. But at one point, Coulthart, said to Nolan, "Do you know?" There are people right now who are, in the Pentagon that know this, and and Nolan says, "Yeah, I know this for a fact." And he made, this was a direct quote that he made during this. He says, "Because I've spoken to regarding the information possibly coming out finally, right? Because of some of the steps that the Congress has made. There's this right now. There's the Defense Authorization Act bill for 2023. It's still not completely passed. It still needs to pass in the Senate and needs to go to the president's desk and needs to be signed. But once it's signed, there's language in there that will make it that anyone who whistleblows on what the Pentagon's been keeping secret with regard to extraterrestrial visitors or anything to that effect, they're not going to, get thrown in jail." So, and Nolan told Coulthart during this interview, he says he knows this for a fact, that there are people prepared to come out and blow the whistle finally. And he says, Coulthart asked him, "How do you know this?" And Nolan responded, "Because I've spoken to the people who are about to come out and whistleblow on it." And he also talked about how Congress pretty much right now, wants to know everything that the Pentagon's been keeping secret since 1947 with regard to aliens and recovered craft and all of that stuff. So, it's very interesting with the time period we're in. Now, I'm still concerned with the Pentagon. I still think that there's most certainly elements within the Pentagon that do not want this information out. Otherwise, we would have it already, right? Actually, Lou Elizondo has talked about this in the past. He said that there's some people, because of some high echelon Pentagon officials, don't want things about UFOs out in the public because it goes against their religious beliefs. We've talked about that before in the podcast. What's very interesting here is that we at some point here, once this Defense Authorization Act bill passes, then that means the floodgates could possibly open. I mean, I would imagine that this would cover even people like Lou Elizondo, who has stated that there are non-disclosure agreements that he's required to abide by. But what if this bill passes? I would imagine that people like him and then the other people within the Pentagon, certain people who are interested in sharing this with the public, people who believe that the whole world should know about this, right? To know about this fact. They want this information out there. So, and if Nolan is saying that he knows people in the Pentagon are, prepared to whistleblow, well, I would have to take his word for it. And let's see, I just read an article here over the weekend from Air Force Magazine. Now, it's not passed yet. This bill has not passed yet, and it might be held up. Actually, there's a concern in this article. I'll leave a link for this article too. It says time is already running short for Congress to pass the 2023 NDAA and the spending bills for the Defense Department. So, with that in mind, I mean, it's possible that it might get held up here. This bill might be held up, till late this year or maybe even next year until there's a new Congress in there, which would be unfortunate. But at some point, right, this bill should pass, unless there's some jokers in the Congress that all of a sudden change their mind and want to remove the language that's already in the House bill. Who say that they want this information released to the public. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. So we're on a holding pattern right now until this passes. It's probably not going to pass before the November midterm elections. It might pass sometime after that, and if it doesn't pass, then they're going to have to pass some temporary bill just to so the Defense Department has money, until this 2023 these 2023 bills do pass. So with that in mind, what happens then? I guess that's my question, is what's the next step then? Okay, say once this bill passes and whistleblowers step forward, what does that entail? What does that mean? What could it mean? What should it mean? Okay, let's think about this. Now, what I would love to see, there's a lot of things I'd like to see. If there's somebody within the Pentagon, just licking their chops, waiting for this bill to pass, and knowing that they're not going to be going to some prison somewhere or shot in the head, and once this bill passes and they come forth with proof, well, what are they going to come forth with? Because, depending on what it is, it could still be construed as, well, we don't know for sure. We could still have some of that. So, I mean, what I would like to see would be some footage. There's most certainly tons of film footage that has been taken from over the years. We know this. There's people who've talked about this. For instance, the late astronaut Gordon Cooper said that he knows of footage that was taken of a UFO landing, a flying saucer landing, and then taking off. He knows he handled that footage and handed it off to the Pentagon, but never got to see it. But he knows that he knew that it existed. I mean, there were reports that there were film crews, from the Army, in Roswell in 1947, filming the actual crash site with the bodies and all that kind of stuff. I would love to see that kind of thing. I mean, I'm assuming, and I would hope that all this older footage from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I'm hoping that it's been taken care of, because film rots and deteriorates over time. I mean, hopefully the Pentagon, people in the Pentagon, or people in charge of who's ever in charge of this program, will call it Majestic 12, because we don't know what it's called today. But at one point, it was apparently called Operation Majestic 12. You would hope that the people in charge of the Pentagon have been, updating this evidence over the years. taking care of the film, actually, transferring it to a computer file. From, I'm sure at one point you would think it was transferred to videotape, and at some point maybe they took the film again, transferred it to DVD and now maybe some sort of a digital disc or something. But at least by this point you would think it's on some computer files that could be accessed. So if somebody's within the Pentagon that is close to this, that wants to share this information, it would be, you would hope that they could, present this kind of information and not be worried about getting in trouble for it. It would be nice to see the actual footage of the Roswell crash, for instance, because anyone who studies the Roswell situation, I always talk about this. There were two guys, they've been doing research on this for decades, Donald Schmidt and Thomas Carey. They've written several books on Roswell. And there's something happened there that was unearthly. There's no question about it. There was just too many witnesses, right? It wasn't a balloon. It wasn't no top secret mogul balloon like a lot of debunkers out there like to hang their hat on. That's all nonsense. So there's film out there that exists, apparently, that there were reports of cameras at that site, and that's just one. I mean, we're talking, how much stuff do they actually have? It's probably tons of stuff. So it would be nice to get some of the old films from the different decades that show us these kind of things. Now, even with that said, or not only that, but photographs, documents, all of that kind of stuff, the talks about, things that really happened that were kept from the public, I'm sure there's other crashes. Roswell was their test run. The only reason we pretty much know about anything about Roswell, because it was the first time it happened, apparently, the first time that, the government wasn't used to, they didn't have an expert team ready to go in and cover things up on the spot at that time. They created that afterward. That was the purpose of Majestic 12. That's why you don't really hear much about the other crashes that happened afterward. They're covered up a lot better than the Roswell one was. So it would be nice to get all of that information. What do they have? What kind of recovered craft do they have? Right. It would be nice to see pictures, data, documents with how many they have. Right. That would be nice. If there's some way to, present that to the Congress. Now, I just want to stop there for a second. Now, Nolan pointed out actually on Twitter over the weekend, somebody asked him, well, what's going to happen? These whistleblowers, are they going to go right to the public at first? Apparently not. They're going to go to Congress and it will be talked about behind doors at first, behind closed doors. I don't like that. I don't like that one bit, right? Because, they might decide, well, we can't let all this out. I can't imagine, right? I could understand if there's something that might, there might be some technical data in there that might, if it was released to the general public, it might become a threat to national security somehow. I don't see how anyone's going to understand, by showing pictures of these crash. Nobody's going to figure out how they operate just by looking at them. We already have pictures of what they look like taken by regular people, civilians over the decades. So I don't see it. So that's one of my concerns. What are they going to, if it goes to Congress first and then Congress gets to look at it like, okay, we'll let this part out, but not that part. I don't like that at all. I think all of it should come out. I think all of it should be let, other than any kind of data this is the only thing I would say that should be kept secret from the public, because it could fall into our enemies' hands, right? Like something like, maybe technical data that they've compiled with regard to how these spacecraft operate based on studying one of the crash saucers, for instance. Okay. Now that I could understand that part. Pictures of how many different, I'd like to know how many different species of aliens are here. Is it just the grays, like some people, or is it the grays, or how many do they know of? How many is the government aware of? Right, and how many do they suspect are actually here? That would be nice to know that information. Like, what have they concluded with regard to that? So I think that's probably some of the things that are going to happen if this is really going to happen, But the one thing that concerns me is that there's time right now. Since the wheels have been set in motion by the Congress, and even beforehand, actually, you would imagine that the elements within the Pentagon who are against releasing this information to the public might be taking steps, and might have already taken those steps to make sure that nothing gets out. Like, there's no proof that any any potential whistleblower could present. So hopefully some of these whistleblowers are actually at that highest echelon and have access no matter what. Nothing can stop them. I guess that's a concern, right? But even with all of that said, you say some whistleblower comes out with some very compelling film, or tons of it, who knows, pictures, images, and stuff like that. Even with that said, you are still going to have the bunker community they're gonna attack it. They're gonna say, well, that's still not enough. And so to end that concern, right? What I would hope and what should happen is that actually whoever steps forward with this information actually comes forward with the actual physical proof, right? The actual physical proof. That would be amazing, to have the actual physical. I don't care how they do it. If they have to throw a flying saucer on the back of a flatbed and drive it to the steps of Congress and take the Congress members out on a tour to show them it, or take them to a site where something's resting. That's something that should be done. They should be shown the actual remains of alien beings that the Pentagon, that's people in the Pentagon, have certainly been keeping on ice for all these years. They're not going to throw out. They're going to keep that kind of stuff, right? They're not going to throw that out. Right? They're not going to throw that stuff into an incinerator. I mean, they're beings from other planets. You're going to hold on to that stuff, so they have to be somewhere, right? Maybe cryogenically frozen, or who knows? But I'm sure that they're preserved someplace with a place where Congress people could be taken, or maybe, hey, cart one right into Congress, right? Bring one of the bodies right there, pack it in some dry ice and cart it in. I don't care how they do it, but you need to come out. This effort should be swift, right, and conclusive. End it right there. Rip the Band-Aid off, right? End all this nonsense right there. A lot of people who've been studying this know for a fact that there's things going on, right? They know that there's a presence here. Anybody who's read all the reports over the years, all of the documents from the military, you put it all together, there's no question. There's an extraterrestrial presence here on this planet, right? There's just no question about it. It's time for the American public. It's time for the world. It's time for the world to see all of this stuff. Right, it's long past due, and we are finally here at the precipice, possibly. But again, I'm always concerned with the Pentagon. The power there, the power that exists there, right? The power to obfuscate, the power to cover things up. I mean, it's always there until that information is released somehow to the public. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned. So I can't wait to see this bill pass, and then I guess it's just a waiting game from that point on. What's going to happen? Who are the whistleblowers? Nolan apparently knows who they are. Some of them anyway. I'm sure who knows how it's going to go down. But we need to have not just film, not just video, not just documents. It would be nice to have scientists of the world actually are granted access to actual alien remains, alien spacecraft, right? And then you could have, a deputation of different scientists come to a podium somewhere and tell the world, yes, we've looked at this, and yes, this is not human, and we don't know where it came from, and that ends it all, right? Well, once that happens, right? Well, all of this debate going back and forth between people who know what's going on and people who pretend, or actually people who don't know, and people who actually make a living off making stuff up, debunking the whole thing, they'll all disappear like when somebody grabs a steak and they slam it in the Dracula at the end of the movie and he just disintegrates. That's what's going to happen with all the debunkers. They're just going to disintegrate, right? They're going to have to find something else to debunk or talk about. They'll all disappear for a few weeks, right? And then they'll come back slowly, creep back into the public consciousness with something new to talk about, and who knows? Or maybe some of them will actually realize the error of their ways, admit it, and say, I was wrong, right? Stand up and say, what, I was wrong. Hey, let's all study this together now. That would be nice too. Wouldn't that be good? But yeah, this is something that I'm excited about, but at the same time, I do have concerns. I think that any sort of whistleblowing, hopefully it involves actual physical proof that makes it undeniable, ends this whole debate once and for all. I'm not exactly sure how you do that, right? But there has to be some ways, whether it's taking people, Congress members, Congress people to the site of where there's craft and or bodies, right? I think it's both. I think it's important that they see both of these and anything else that we might not even know about. There could be things out there that the government has possession of that a lot of people just don't talk about because nobody knows about it. I mean, who knows what they know about this phenomenon? It'd be nice to have like an index featuring all the different pictures of the different kind of aliens that were recovered from these craft. Are they all the same? There's just a lot of different things that the government has to have possession of. At this point, you would hope after 75 years, you would think, right? They have to have possession of some materials that could, it's probably the story is not complete. I mean, I'm certain, right? I am certain that there's no way that they could. It would have been impossible, even over the 75 years, in my mind, anyhow, to reverse engineer technology that could be a million years more advanced than anything that we have. It just, I don't see how you would do it. Again, it would be like taking a calculator, and even if somebody traveled back in time with a calculator and handed it to Socrates or Plato, they wouldn't know what to do with it. They would take it apart. They would see all these. They wouldn't know. A solar calculator. What? They could look at that. Those people could have looked at that for 1,000 years and they never would have figured it out. So, that's why I don't think that anybody in the government, anybody in the private community, they probably figured some things out, but not all of it. If they figured all of it out, we would have taken the world over by this point, right? There would be no threats from anybody. Look what we got. Stop us now. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and I think hopefully, it happens and it's done in a way that everyone. There's no putting Pandora back into the box, and hopefully the whistleblowers that Nolan's been talking to, right? Hopefully they understand. I'm sure that they do. I'm sure these people are smart people, and they probably have things already figured out. Hopefully, maybe they're storing stuff in their own basement, ready to, take to Congress. Who knows what they're doing? But it needs to be just. I mean, of course, I want photos, film, documents, all of that kind of stuff. That's great, and that's going to be necessary, of course. But we need to actually have the physical evidence to show the world. Physical evidence. Think about it. Physical evidence ends the debate. No more nonsense for the debunkers. It's all over. Then we take a step forward as a human race.